welcome back to the podcast. In today's episode, I spoke with Matt, and it was a great time. We touched on having too strict of a routine, sharing what has helped you heal, generating the right type of energy, building self-awareness, and how perfectionism is toxic. You want to avoid it. So if you enjoy my efforts, please just do me a favor. I'm never going to be running ads, so this is the best way to help me. Just drop a rating on Spotify, whatever stars you think. I want your authentic feedback. I appreciate that. And if you really want to help me out, share it with a like-minded individual, because that's the best way to get the spread, just through word of mouth, or you get it, you get me, like through the sharing to your close circles. I appreciate you. Enjoy the conversation.
There were a lot of emotional struggles, but I wouldn't have really had the context to understand that at any point until pretty recently in my life, because part of the way I've grown is by really educating myself about emotions and how they work, and that's allowed me to really unfold the past differently. So now I can see it from a different perspective. And so getting bullied a lot, feeling like you're not accepted and things like that can be it's really harmful and challenging. And I would say that I dealt with it at the time by just pretty much walling that off, and getting really disconnected from my feelings. I would suppress or repress, all these negative feelings, because it was painful for me to deal with that. And I lacked the coping strategies that would have helped me process those emotions and let go of them in a healthy way. So in a sense, I just kind of carried them, with me throughout my whole life, which then, really just serves to attract more of that into your life, right? So, these same problems would just keep finding me as I was a teenager, and then in my 20s and even into my 30s. So, it was a lot of painful emotions, and a really important part of my journey, maybe the most important part of my journey, has been learning about that and learning how to let go of those things, and how to, even now when emotions come up, right, how to process those and handle those.
And I like how you hit on quote unquote even now, because some people, this is kind of how I thought at the beginning of my journey, that others just have it unlocked, like they don't have tough situations once you get to a certain point in life. It reminds me of that idea, once I have this, I'll feel this way. In
Mm-hmm.
reality, that is just never going to work for anyone, because even the best individuals, the ones who have done work, who have accomplished a lot intellectually and physically, materialistically, we still have those negative moments, the hard emotions that are just challenging to deal with.
Yeah.
And it's like this idea, even when you've done something good, if you stop doing the actions that got you to the impressive point that you're at, you start to feel horrible almost immediately. Like it's this problem or this tough situation. I used to wish for an easy life, and now I realize that was a very, very not the right thing for me to be doing with my focus, with my attention. Now I understand, okay, well, life is going to continuously throw rough, challenging situations at you. What it's about is becoming a good problem solver, learning how to handle situations. So that leads me to wonder, what are some of your keystone acts or habits? What do you need to do each day to feel good and to continue on the path that you're on?
Yeah, it's something that's kind of evolved over time, and something I'm always telling my clients is you don't have to be perfect when you start, right? It's going to be an evolution, and even I lost 75 pounds back in 2016, 2017, and I built in these certain habits that were, I saw them as fundamental. But as the time's gone on, as I've evolved, I've been able to let go of some of those to, replace them with even healthier healthier habits or habits that serve my life now. So it's never a stagnant thing. For me now, I would say the most important habit is sun exposure, and just really lining myself up with the sun, fixing my circadian rhythm. So every morning I go out at sunrise and I walk for about 15 minutes. And then, I do that again at some point in the middle of the day and then again at sunset. And, I'm big on kind of avoiding blue light and screens and stuff like that after sunset. And, I sleep a lot better. And, this really kind of, I think, builds an important health foundation for me. So, sun exposure. And then I would say, really quality nutrition is super important, hydration, sleep, and that comes with the sun exposure, and then exercise. That to me really is kind of the foundation of how to live a healthy life and how to maximize the amount of energy I'm able to generate. And the more energy I can generate, the more energy I can give back to the world through, the things that I'm doing. So, in a sense, this is how I see myself best serving the world and my purpose.
And really, isn't that what it all comes down to? Once we create meaning, see, you don't find meaning, we create meaning. And I absolutely am glad that you touched on such a natural, what is the word? The evolutionary biology of human beings. See, a lot of people will throw, when I ask a question like that, like what is your fundamentals to a good day, they'll say something more like 10 minutes of meditation or reading, and those things are amazing. I absolutely love those. But the sunlight, the actual circadian rhythm of, the circadian rhythm, it gets our digestive system going, very important, and speeds up our metabolism. And we need that sunlight to get our physiology working. And I am bothered by the fact that schools don't educate us on these physical, and it's like this mind-body connection. If I'm sitting in this office and I'm looking at screens for an extended period of time without getting sunlight or fresh air, that is so obvious. That is exactly why my mood turns into shit. And no one really tells kids this stuff. Like, good parents do, of course, but this is just some of the basic physiology that I would have loved to have instilled into me at a younger age. And it can't be underestimated how important eating clean food is and getting sunlight is. When I eat, see, I don't eat poorly anymore, but for a while, I was always in good shape and I would still dabble with processed foods. Example, Oreos. Love Oreos, but they're fake. They're bioengineered and they're so bad, just so bad. And I did not make the connection that the Oreos were literally directly linked to my mood going down the drain. And once I made these connections, everything got a bit better. But I love your point also on everything is evolution. What got you to where you are right now? It might not be what's going to get you to the next level.
Yeah.
So let's riff on that a little bit.
Yeah.
Tell me a bit about your evolution and how you have recognized when something that served you for a little bit, it's time to actually change.
Yeah.
Like that's a hard thing.
Yeah, so I've built. I turned my life around really with discipline and consistency, and being really intentional about certain behaviors. So, for example, I got a Fitbit for Christmas in 2013 from my mother, and I opened the gift up, and my first response was, "Oh, this is stupid. I don't want this thing, right?" And it was one of the old ones too, that was just like a rubber band basically, and had some lights on it. It didn't even tell you the time or anything. But I put it on anyway, and I went for a walk, and I started walking 10,000 steps every day. And then one day it snowed, and I actually still managed to walk to the bar and go home, but I fell short of the 10,000. I only got like 8,000, and I felt bad about myself, right? Because I was out of shape and in bad health, and I had developed this kind of good habit, and I couldn't do it. So what I said was, I'm going to walk 10,000 steps every day now. And I did it every day for the next 7.5 years. Right? Because I just made a commitment to myself that I was going to walk 10,000 steps every day, and it was a fundamental habit for me. It was great to do it. It was life changing, in so many ways. And then one point, I took up doing endurance sports and long distance triathlon, right? And I was training like crazy, and all of a sudden this step streak sort of becomes a burden, right? Like I'll swim in the day, and I'll also do a bike workout in the day. And now on top of this, I have to also go out and walk 5 miles just to keep like this, it just becomes kind of like frustrating. Like this isn't healthy really to be doing this anymore. I'm serving the habit, and the habit's not serving me anymore. So I got sick one day, and then I didn't walk 10,000 steps that day, and I was fine letting it go. And now I have a healthier approach where I say, oh, I walk 10,000 steps most days, right? And I'm not so rigid and so routine about having to do it every single day and feeling like a failure if I don't, because now I'm able to sort of zoom out and see the big picture. But when I started, that sort of rigidity and consistency, that was what really kept me going. So it served its purpose. And then I let it go, and then it gets replaced with something else or something like that.
And I think that is instrumental for a lot of humans. You have to start somewhere, and consistency and discipline is usually what you're lacking or what got you into the hole that you're trying to slowly get out of. And I love that point you made about having too strict of a routine. See, I love balance in life, but sometimes balance is symmetrical and sometimes it's not symmetrical. Sometimes it is completely abstract and kind of like you mentioned, it's good to walk 10,000 steps in a day, but if you're beating yourself up when you didn't, even though you swam and let's say you lifted weights too,
Yeah.
it's you don't want to overdo yourself. And this is this unique this unique measuring of the scales, not doing too much, not doing too little, understanding when to relax, when you need to work, and structuring your days in a way where you're not wired all the time. Humans need to wind down, but you're also not just lazy and slacking all the time. We have to, and this really comes down to the individual, but there are also activities, habits, and routines that are going to help every single person. Like some of the I've been battling with this one for a little bit, and I think I've finally found myself at a good place. I used to have a morning routine that was way too long because everyone says have a morning routine. So I made one, and it was just too time consuming. Now my routine is quick, but I still have a routine. It's just like either if I flip it depending on if I'm doing legs or a push-pull day. But let's say I'm doing legs, I'll do 30 push-ups right when I wake up. It's something that is a bit challenging. 30 push-ups, it just sets the tone for the day. And that's about it. Like 30 push-ups, say a quick prayer, and then I'm off to doing work on my business, on my brand. But I used to have such an extended morning routine that I was subtracting from the amount of work I was getting done. So it's like, we need routines. We need to ease into the day. We need nighttime, wind down time. But how do we find that abstract balance? I think that's a good thing for everyone to wonder upon. And I'll ask you, like, how have you created a balance in your life? And yeah, just let me hear a little bit about your life and
Yeah.
how you've created a balance.
Yeah. Well, so a lot of what you say makes a lot of sense, and I think it's right. It's about, does the habit serve me, or am I just serving the habit? Am I just doing this because this is something that I think I need to do, or doing this every day with consistency and rigidity, is this actually helping me? And I would say that I haven't really been living a balanced life recently, but I've been really intentional about that. I've spent most of this year training for an Ironman, and I really just decided that if I'm going to do this, I'm going to do it right, and I'm going to I'm going to just really put my head down and do everything I can to prepare for this. So I put a lot of my business kind of on the back burner for that, and I really just kind of dedicated a large portion of my life to training for an Ironman. And on the one hand, it might seem like, oh, this is kind of trivial, right? To do something like this, and believe me, the thought would cross my mind. But what I realized was, this is just a sub purpose that I have. Like, I'm not going to dedicate the entirety of my life to this, but for this short period of time, if I could take all my energy and all my focus and focus my attention onto this, right, and then do that, and then achieve something, well, then that's worth it. And then when that comes to an end, I know from past experiences that there's going to be a letdown, and I'm going to need something else. So now I'm taking that energy and that stuff, and I'm focusing into my business, into teaching, into things like that. But I felt kind of strongly that I needed to do this first before I could really get to the teaching part, right? Because you actually have to have achieved it, right? There's a saying from Emerson: do the thing and you will have the power, right? But you got to do the thing in order to have the power. So I felt like I needed to just do this, and now it's a different, I'll say, season of life where I can kind of change my focus, change my attention, and direct it in a different way. And I'm just going to kind of keep living my life like that, because I feel like when our attention and our energy gets really split up, and it just gets kind of spread apart, it's really hard for us to achieve anything. So if we're able to really focus a large portion of our energy on something, we'll be more successful. It'll happen faster, probably. You'll get better results. So at that point, it's really just a question kind of priority management, right? Like what do you want to make as your priorities, and then directing your energy toward those priorities as you deem appropriate. It's more than just living through life aimlessly, and just trying to do everything, or too many things, for example, right? Like, I knew I couldn't grow my business and train for an Ironman at the same time, so I didn't try to do both, because I knew that I couldn't have done it the way I wanted to.
You're absolutely hitting a lot of points that I love, and that's what it comes down to, is priorities. I was reading a newsletter recently, and the concept that the man was speaking on is, you can't get in the best shape of your life, build your business, build your marriage, and I forgot the fourth one. But the point is, you can't do all these things. Like you said, you spread yourself too thin, and then you end up being low quality in all those areas. So you see, you say your life isn't balanced, but in my perception, it's abstractly balanced. It doesn't always have to be symmetrical, and you have clearly identified your priority. So life is trade-offs, and I love that point. Really, it comes down to this idea: if I want to be in the best shape of my life, I will not be going to the bar, probably ever, because there is a trade-off right there. And I'm not saying that you cannot drink if you want to be in the best shape of your life, but the point is, it comes down to our habits. And if you're drinking one night, the odds increase that you're going to drink the next night. And so if you're a disciplined person, let's say you're disciplined, and even while you're under the influence in a different state of consciousness, you can still remain disciplined. Hey, all power to you. I just know myself. I know how states of consciousness change, and I don't want to increase the probability that I make poor decisions. And then we could just go into the physiology of how alcohol affects you. It's not just for a 24-hour period, but 48 and 72 hours. So, mini rant, but it really comes down to understanding our priorities, really accepting the fact life is trade-offs, it's seasons, and it's so important to understand that. These are like psychological concepts that had, and here's the tough thing, like I would have loved to known what I know now earlier, but that's just not how life works. I think we have to go through hardship to grow, to improve. It teaches us what we don't want to be, and that's powerful. So it, give me a little idea of what you would call your big picture purpose. I know it's a general question, but I feel a lot of people are struggling with meaning right now, and I love to hear about people's purpose, about their meaning.
Yeah, it's an interesting question. And this is something that I speak to my clients about, and I've talked about a bit on social media, and it can be hard to identify your purpose, right? You'll sometimes see these things, be like, oh, open up your journal and write about your purpose. And I'm like, what if I don't even know what my purpose is? How the heck am I supposed? No one told me, right? Like, I don't know. But what I've kind of figured out is a system of using sub purposes. Right. So you don't even necessarily need to be consciously aware of what your overall purpose is. You don't necessarily need to have the ability to write it out on an index card in two sentences, like a corporate kind of ethos. Like this is my purpose. Right. Somewhere deep inside, what your purpose is. You might not be able to articulate it, but what you can do throughout your life is by harnessing these certain sub purposes, right? And these sub purposes work toward building you up to this larger purpose, even if it's not something you can necessarily articulate with ease what it is. So, like for example, throughout my recent life, I would say that I made losing weight a purpose of mine for 9 months. It was pretty much the only thing I cared about every day was losing weight, and once I achieved that goal, well, then I kind of picked up a different purpose, right? And that was kind of lifting weights and things like that, right? And as I can look back now, I see it building toward my overall purpose, right? Which seems to be something along the lines of really teaching what I've learned to the world and helping other people overcome these sort of things. You look at the statistics, and there's, 70% of the people are overweight or obese, might even be higher than that, right? And so many people feel like they're stuck and lost in this situation. I feel like, my purpose is to help them with that and explain to them and, teach them, no, this isn't true. You can overcome this. And this is how you do it. So, as I look back, these kind of sub purposes, as I called them, have really all supported this overall purpose that I'm building towards, right? And I don't even know that I want to know what my purpose is, because if it's something that I could achieve next year, well, then what would the point be, right? And then what would I do for the rest of my life? So even if that were to be the case, well, then there would have to be something else after that, because when I'm 42, I'm going to need a reason to wake up and get after it every day still too. So it's just something, there's no beginning and end. It's just process, and it's just over and over and over again. You just keep going.
Yeah, it is. In high school, I always wished for this easy life. This, once I have money, I won't have to worry. I won't have as much responsibility, yada yada. I was so wrong. And it's this idea of sharing what helped you heal. I think this is what so many humans find meaning through doing, because we all have different pain points. Like I mentioned earlier, there are simple things that are fundamental to any healthy human being, like eating clean, sunlight, and getting the right amount of sleep. But at the same time, the trauma, the problems, the tough situations that each individual experiences will be unique to the individual. But at the same time, there's going to be so many individuals who have experienced something similar. So it's like big world, but small world. Our problems might be able to benefit someone who really needs to hear what we have learned. And I really see such an opportunity as technology evolves. We've never had the chance to reach so many humans as we do right now. And that also goes into the amount of wisdom we can gain through videos, free videos. We've never had the opportunity to become as wise as we can right now. So we're just living in an opportunity abundant time. And what's really important is that human beings at least work to create some sort of meaning. And I'd like to get into a bit of practical guidance for identifying little subcategories that we can go down, because like you mentioned, losing weight, that was one of your small, I don't want to say smaller goals, but it was a goal for 9 months, and then it is not really your goal anymore, because now you're working towards bigger goals than just losing weight. And I guess, like, what do you think about what are some practical steps or questions that an individual could ask themselves to figure out some subcategories that they really should begin to address and prioritize?
Yeah, I don't know that that would even be the best way to do it. I think it's just you gotta kind of connect with your body and be able to learn where your energy is taking you, and that is I think really what you need to pay attention to, because you're attracted to certain things, and that's probably for a reason, right? And especially if it's an area where you have some natural talents or gifts, right? Gifts aren't for us to use. Gifts are your gift is for the world to enjoy, right? So it's not your gift that you keep. You give gifts. So I think it's really just kind of tuning in on that and focusing on where your energy is, what makes you feel good, what brings you joy, like those sort of things. And I know a lot of people are probably stuck still, and they might say, right, they're disconnected from their body because they spend a lot of time in fear-based states of emotion, just because the modern world can be very stressful, and most people don't have the capacity to handle the stress of the modern world effectively. So they spend a lot of their time in fear-based states, and they might not feel a pull toward anything. They might say, well, I just go to work every day. I sit in a cubicle, I get yelled at, I send emails, I come home, and then I just, have a beer, I sit down, I watch Netflix, I go to bed, and I wake up and I do it all over again. I'm not really drawn to anything. And I understand that, and that's a problem of you need to generate more energy, and one of the ways you can do it is by doing these things that you're interested in. So I think some really good practical advice is to think about the things that you loved as a child, right? Because as a small child, our minds aren't really nearly as developed as they are now. So we would not have the tendency to be nearly as overcome and lost in thought, and having kind of the analytical mind take over, and it would be really more of our spirit would be kind of running the show at that point. So if there's something that you loved as a kid, well, that's probably something that on a deep level you were drawn to for a reason. So I think that can be a great place to start with it.
I've heard that question a lot, and for me it was a bit challenging to even recall, to bring myself back to being a child and kind of ponder upon what did I naturally like as a kid. And it really took me a while to figure out that I wouldn't say I like this, but just as I've learned about myself a bit more, I remembered I was always decent when the teacher called on me to read a paragraph from a book. I could always do that, like, confidently. And I didn't practice it. It just came naturally. And now I find myself having conversations and speaking, and people every once in a while will say, the way you phrased that was really beautiful. And I'm like, I don't know. I'm not
Yeah.
doing anything special.
And that's not something you're even thinking about. That's just, it's flowing through you, right? So it's a gift, and it's just, you're just expressing that to the world as you do it.
And the action of figuring out our gifts, I think we need to emphasize that fact because a lot of people don't even understand this concept. But as I've gotten a bit more spiritual and just realized we're not human beings, but we're spiritual beings, or we're beings of energy inside of human bodies, I want more people to understand that you have a gift. You have some natural talent. And if you are not aware of it, that's what's happening. It's not that you don't have a gift. You just haven't done the work to investigate
Mm-hmm.
and realize what that gift is. And I think a good way for people to get a bit closer to finding their gift, to creating it, is to cut out the distractions, because when we're consuming so much, like you mentioned, fear-based content, we're worrying. We have no energy to think about creating or becoming. We're just in this negative, low frequency state of consciousness. And that is why I love exercise and eating clean. So I eat clean, that gives me more energy to exercise. When I exercise, I raise my state of consciousness into a high frequency. So therefore, the rest of my day, I am having the probability of positive thinking has gone up. And that is the simplest way can kind of explain why we should eat clean and exercise, because all of us want to think positive. I don't, unless we're talking to a nihilist who is really just you that negative. Most people want to fix their life, even if we're talking about the poor soul who is trapped in a cubicle and in this cycle of low energy because of his actions. I know that's a lot, but just let me know what you think about that.
It makes a lot of sense, and that's how I would see it. And this is why I would say my habits and routines are really geared around energy generation. Because I would say that I spend a lot of my time in a low energy state, and I think it's important for people to understand. I never really understood what this concept was of energy, and it was something that I've spent a lot of time researching, and I've read some great books by David Hawkins and Frederick Dobson, who do a great job of sort of explaining this, and in a way that my analytical mind could understand it. But I spent most of my life in a low energy state, and energy is synonymous with emotion. So, I was in low emotional states and low energy states. It was chronic, so I didn't realize it. So for me, it seemed normal. It's like what's the fish think of the water? Well, the fish doesn't even know that the water's there. So if you would have asked me even into my mid-20s, like what anxiety was, I wouldn't have been able to tell you. Certainly wouldn't have been able to tell you, oh, I have chronic anxiety. It's horrible. I hate it. Like I didn't know that. I didn't realize it. Um, but by increasing my energy, right, and by doing that through losing weight, through eating better, right, through getting outside and walking, through getting sun exposure, right, through getting good sleep, this all has increased my energy, and now I'm able to connect with things in a different way because I'm able to give energy to the world, and I don't need to take energy. So that to me is really the fundamental question, and getting to these high states of energy, and just really letting go of the low states, right? Emotions are an important guidance system for us, and I'm telling I tell my clients all the time, right, that if you feel shameful about something, well, if it's something that you're supposed to feel shameful about, that is a healthy emotional response. And
Mm.
the answer is to listen to this, right? And stop doing what you feel shameful about. It's not to bury it or to drink a beer and forget about it, right? Or to attack somebody else on the internet, right? Project it onto somebody else. Listen to your emotions and what they're telling you. Don't just put the piece of tape over the check engine light in your car and keep driving. So this is what it is. We have a perfect guidance system within us. We just need to turn off our minds and connect to it at the right energy, and we just need to learn to trust what our gut tells us, or what God tells us, or what our instincts are. Like, these are all kind of synonymous, I think, for the same sort of thing.
Yeah, how you ended that off is really hitting the nail on the head with the whatever you want to call it, the universe, God, energy, intuition, gut feeling. It is okay, so let's talk practical. When you feel guilt or regret, what act drives that? For me, it's probably two activities that make me feel guilty and regretful. Number one is losing my cool, being angry, saying things while I'm angry that I don't mean. So, how do I fix that? I practice mindfulness and self awareness. So, I'm not going to be annoyed with myself for having feelings of frustration. I'm annoyed with myself when I don't recognize them and I lose my cool, rather than having healthy habits like, okay, let's say I stub my toe. How about I do some push-ups or go for a quick walk if I stub my toe, rather than starting to yell at my dog because I stubbed my toe.
Mm-hmm.
That comes from mindfulness. But the other one is watching porn. Anytime I have ever, once my awareness was at the point to realize I don't even know what made me feel guilty or shameful or regretful about watching porn, but now once I think it comes from the knowing of how it negatively affects our dopamine circuitry and the cheap dopamine that comes from watching that. So I listen to the guilt and the regret, and I don't dwell on it, but that is my inspiration never to indulge or break discipline, because I understand I do this, get the cheap dopamine, I'm going to feel guilty and be full of regret all day. And
Mm-hmm.
I'd rather feel good all day instead of getting an 8-second cheap dopamine rush.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think for me, it's, you feel guilt when you do something that's either harmful to yourself, or harmful to others, or both. And again, that's probably a very healthy response to the situation, right? If you're doing something that's harming you, well, it's not supposed to feel good, right? It's telling you, hey, stop doing this thing. It's harming you, right? Like this is what, your guidance system is telling you. And, again, when you're harming others, that's something you should listen to, right? Because we're here to help others. We're not here to harm others, like I saw, I had, I had an opportunity the other day when I was grilling. There was like I'm in Florida, so there's a lizard in the grill, and I like turned the grill on, and this thing starts running around on the grill, and like I couldn't like just kill this thing for no reason, right? Because I felt guilty about it, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
this is, and for me, I think it's different than like grilling a piece of meat. Because grilling a piece of meat, well, at least I'm going to be honoring the animal and their sacrifice, and it's going to, help me kind of live my life and give me energy, right? So it's not just a malevolent, wasteful act that I'm doing, but just seeing the poor innocent lizard there, I'm like, I can't just cook this thing because I'm, like it felt wrong.
Mm.
So, that was a feeling of guilt I was getting. So I just went inside and cooked inside instead, because it was like, I don't want to just kill something needlessly. And I felt guilty about that. And, some people might say, well, that's crazy. Who cares? It's just a lizard. But, it's still a living thing, and if I can not harm it, then I think I'm better for that.
Yeah, I have a problem with people who would say, well, what's the issue with killing that thing? That to me, it's obvious, but
Yeah.
I don't want to place myself on a pedestal because I feel that way. I just would ask you, really? Like, does
Yeah.
does killing an animal when you could let it live make sense? And that's a good point you brought up, because I consume a lot of eggs and meat. And let me tell you, if it was not correlating to me having higher energy and being able to help other people spread a positive message, be a positive person, I wouldn't be eating it.
Hmm.
But what I've realized is those simple whole foods, grass finished animals, not GMO corn and soy fed cows, but grass finished cows, and not chickens that were raised inside of a cage in factory farming, but free small family farm chickens. I support that type of nutritional structure because it allows us to give back.
Yeah.
But it's funny how this has transpired. I used to kill all insects, not caring at all. Now, even last week, I was at the point where I would still accept killing spiders, but last week I took a spider, put this thing on a tissue, and I put it
Yeah.
outside. And I don't say this to seem noble. I say this because I feel bad killing it, so I don't kill it. Like we talked about, it's just listening to our feelings and not suppressing them, but
Yeah.
listening to how we feel.
Yeah, and like I feel nothing bad about killing a mosquito that's biting me. Like this thing started it. If it just wanted to fly around, I have no problem. It can live its life and fly on, But if you want to, come at me, well, all right, I'm a lot bigger than you, so sorry, this is what it's going to be. It makes a lot of sense. I think we're here to respect life. And, another thing too, though, is right. I try my best to eat ethically sourced animals and all this stuff. But at the same time, I think it's important for us to understand that it's complicated, the world, right? And you're not going to be perfect at this, right? Doing it 90% of the time is going to be better than doing it 0% of the time, right? And, just do your best with it, right? If you're traveling and you stop and you eat at McDonald's because it's the only restaurant around, then okay, no big deal, right? But just do your best with it. Like most things in life, perfectionism is kind of a disease, and it keeps us from evolving because we feel like we have to do it perfectly. We have to be perfect, right? And we have to know all this stuff. And you just got to let that go and do your best with it and be happy with doing most of it or nearly all of it, being 80, 90% for most things. That's going to be fine. And that's probably even going to be healthier than trying to be 100%, because one of the big things I see being, I don't want to say I'm a fitness influencer or a health influencer, but there's a lot of neurotic people who take this way too far. And at
Mm.
a certain point, that neuroticism is harming you more than avoiding all the toxins and all this stuff, right? Like it becomes stressful. Once it becomes stressful for you to manage it, then you got to pull back a little bit and just, do your best with the situation.
I'm so glad you brought up that point because I think a lot of people, at least I suffered with this for a while. I don't think I'm that different from other people. That this perfectionism it's destructive, and we need to figure out a simple rule. I like the 80/20 rule. Most of my life I'm doing exactly what I know I should be doing. And but 20% of the time, it's not that I do activities that have negative consequences, but I don't always have to be perfect. Like an example I would use is I have changed my standards. So the 20% of the time that I'm doing something that is not aligned with the other 80%, it's still not detrimental. Like some people might say 80/20, and their 20% is doing cocaine.
Yeah.
My 20% is eating plantains that are a snack. You know what
Yeah.
I mean? Those plantains were made with 3 ingredients: coconut
Yeah.
oil, the green plantains, and I think water or salt.
Yeah.
But that's my point, is what are your standards at? And you might have too high of standards, probably not. I should cut that out. I won't. But
Yeah.
the odds are that your standards are too low, and that You should expect more of yourself, but at the same time, don't expect perfection. It's okay to stumble. What it comes down to is when you stumble, have you, number one, identified that quickly? And number two, do you have an action or a habit to make you feel good after you stumbled? So let's say I make a mistake and I watch porn. I'm not going to sit here and dwell all day. I'm going to do something like read for an hour, have a podcast episode, go train at the gym, cook a healthy meal, play with my dogs, go on a walk, etc. You need to have habits that if you do ever make a mistake, because we're not perfect, don't expect it. You need to have something to reroute.
Yeah. When you make a mistake, because I mean, it's going to happen, right? We're all going to make lots of mistakes. And, it's just, and I think that ties into just having, on some subconscious level, a negative self-image and feeling like you're not, you're not enough, you're not good enough. And this is why, getting to the point where you can love yourself unconditionally, and this is really what the challenge is how do you get to the point where you love yourself unconditionally? And that means without conditions, right? So that means you love yourself just as much as when you're doing these things, that are harmful to you or harmful to others, right? And you're no more or less worthy for love than when you were at your best, right? But also balancing that out with accountability, right? And then saying, yes, I'm still worthy of love. I'm still the same great person, even though I did this thing that I think is horrible. But how do I hold myself accountable for that behavior? And then how do I move forward from that and actually learn the lesson and actually improve my behavior moving forward, right? And make this mistake that I made, make it a positive and rather than a negative, and that's, I think, where real growth comes in is learning from our mistakes and turning our mistakes into positives. That's what it's all about for me.
Yeah, well, when we win, we're on our high horse usually, unless you're a wise person who understands that, or unless you're a wise human who has lost a lot, you're usually not reflecting when you win. But this does go full circle because earlier we touched on this. You need hardship and you need challenging situations to become the person you're supposed to be. Like, I have gone through so many days in my life where I wouldn't wish it upon anyone else, but I also wouldn't erase it because I needed that.
Mm-hmm.
That is something that is so difficult to articulate. Like, there are some situations that are too much for words to express. They're so deep that the individual really has to experience that feeling and make it out the tunnel before they can really relate.
Yeah.
And I will make it a goal of mine to be able to articulate aspects like that, but there are just situations that we do have to go through, states of consciousness where we are just so sick of being sick and tired. My rock bottom was not a terrible rock bottom, but internally I was suffering. Internally, it was rock bottom. I still had shelter, had food, had a loving mom. It wasn't that bad.
Yeah.
But internally, I think we all do need to get sick of being sick and tired. We have to come to a place of, I can't do this anymore, to inspire change. Is that kind of how you felt when you started making changes?
Yeah, it was really it was a gradual thing. I started walking 10,000 steps every day, and I didn't really lose any weight for like 2.5 years because weight loss has more to do with what you're eating than the walking. And on some level, I know that because I had lost weight many times before in the past. So it was a gradual thing, and I often wonder like what it was that prompted me to do this because I had a rough weekend. It was Labor Day weekend in 2016, and I drank way too much, and I just felt bad about myself. And I said, I need to just not drink for like a week, right? I need to just give myself like this whole week, the weekend, and then the whole next week, right? And you know, I need to just take some time away from this. And I did that. And after a few days, I had a hard time sleeping. I woke up early and I was out, you know, walking. It was before dawn, the sun was rising. And I challenged myself to run a mile. I hadn't run in years. I was overweight. And you know, I said, let me, there's a marked trail out behind my apartment. And I'm like, let me run a mile. So I just ran a mile and somehow I did it, and I didn't time myself, but you know, it was somehow I dragged myself you know, across that finish line. And then after I did it, I felt both kind of euphoric, that like, wow, I could do that was great, but it also felt shameful, like, you know, I'm 34 years old, it shouldn't be this much of an achievement just to run a really slow, painful mile. So I committed myself right then and there to, you know, just getting into shape. You know, what got me to that point? Well, that's a hard thing to answer. What I would suggest is I had floor seats at a Bruce Springsteen concert about a week earlier. And I would imagine the amount of energy that I was exposed to throughout that experience for like the 4-hour concert, that must have been quite a shock for my system at the time, because I probably hadn't experienced that degree of energy in years and years and years, probably. So I think it's, you know, somehow related to that, and me kind of realizing as that faded that, you know, I was just plummeting back into a low energy state again. And it gave me some glimpse into like, well, you can be a much higher energy state, but you need to cut this low energy behavior out. And you know, I think that was kind of what the crux of it was. And, you know, just some part of me that you know, hadn't given up. I guess I'd say my spirit took over and guided me in that way that morning.
Yeah, and see, time and time again, this is why I like having faith, having some sort of spirituality, because in high school, I was raised Christian. My mom said prayers with me every night. She rubbed my back, and it was just absolutely sweet. But during high school, I kind of fell into this phase of materialism. Only wanted hot girls, money, cars, and nothing else mattered to me. I didn't really have a bigger picture understanding. And what I'm getting at is, so many humans that I've listened to, that I've spoken to, and me myself have no idea where this comes from, but we get this sort of spiritual nudge, this awakening, this urge. For me, it was, I have no idea where this came from. I just had the urge, knowing that my grandma was a very big Christian lady, to ask her for a Bible. Ask her, and I was drawn to it enough. I have no idea why, no idea. But I read the whole book, and it laid the foundation for me becoming who I am at this current moment. And it's just mind-blowing how people get these weird, just spiritual nudges. It is the evidence that I needed to believe in something. Because if I didn't get this, if I didn't speak to so many individuals who have gone through something similar, I would never have a belief. But it's just, I have rock solid evidence just from what I've experienced person to person. It's irrefutable. But I want to leave off with a little kind of assignment, a question that the audience can really ask themselves that will at least prompt you toward making changes. And it would be, what are the activities that you do that make you feel good, that have no downside? Do more of those activities, because what we've talked about, full circle, it really comes down to energy. If you do not have the energy to think good thoughts, to participate in the behavior that it is a positive feedback loop that encourages more good thoughts and good feelings, you're going to be in a rut, and you'll be stuck in this valley. So figure out what those activities are that don't have a downside. Identify those, do more of those. Identify what you should be. Identify what you're doing that you know you shouldn't be doing, like we talked about earlier. If it gives you shame, guilt, or regret, that is healthy. That is your emotions. You're a very complex human being. Like, we have so many organs working inside of us that we have no idea how they're working and why they're working. They're just working. Like, when we blink, sometimes I can choose to blink, but sometimes I blink randomly. Like, who's making that happen? I have no idea. Someone very intelligent created us. So yeah. I appreciate you so much. This conversation, very enjoyable. Um, if you want to send the audience anywhere, where should we send them?
You can check me out on Twitter at Matt Izzo. That's Mattizzo. So that's really kind of the best way to find me. I put out most of my content on there. I do have a Instagram, which is Matt Izzo Fitness, and I post some stuff on there, and then also a TikTok at Matt Izzo Fitness that I'm trying to grow. Trying to get to different people with different mediums and share my message. And I like to really just kind of lead a positive community, on Twitter, especially. It can be a negative place, but I think it could also be a positive place. So I try to be encouraging and helpful and just cultivate that sort of atmosphere. And if you're interested in following or engaging with me, I'd be grateful for that, because this is why I share all that I do, is to help everybody, and help make people have a better day and a better life.
That's really what we're here for, man. We're here to serve other human beings. And thank you so much. I had a pleasure speaking with you, wishing you a great rest of your day, and thank you. Much
Thanks, bro.
appreciation.
Awesome speaking with you too. I'm always happy I got to do it.